Imagine this. You're in a meeting. The smartest person in the room is silent, their face unreadable. Meanwhile, someone who barely understands the topic is speaking the loudest, dominating the conversation with confidence and certainty. No one stops them. In fact, some people even nod along. It's not just frustrating, it's dangerous. Because this isn't an isolated moment. It's a pattern. We see it in politics, in companies, on social media, even in our friend groups. The loudest voices aren't necessarily the wisest. Often, they're the least qualified. And those who've actually done the work, read the books, wrestled with complexity, question their own assumptions, remain in the shadows, hesitant to speak. Why? Why do the most thoughtful people second-guess themselves? While the most ignorant ones seem absolutely sure of everything, this isn't just annoying, it's structural, and it has a name. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, a psychological bias, where people with the least competence are often the most confident. But what if this isn't just psychology? What if it's philosophical? What if the real reason why people stay quiet isn't just self-doubt, but a deep existential tension that modern society punishes them for feeling? This video won't just explain the Dunning-Kruger effect. It will decode it, layer by layer, so you can understand what's really happening and, more importantly, what it means for you. In 1995, a man named MacArthur Wheeler walked into two banks in Pittsburgh and robbed them in broad daylight without a mask. He genuinely believed he was invisible to security cameras. Why? Because he had rubbed lemon juice on his face. He thought lemon juice, which could be used as invisible ink, would somehow make him invisible. When arrested, he was shocked. "But I wore the juice," he told the police. This ridiculous story caught the attention of psychologist David Dunning. He realized something profound. Wheeler wasn't just wrong, he was confidently wrong. And that's more dangerous than being ignorant. Together with Justin Kruger, Dunning launched a study to investigate this effect. They tested people's grammar logic and sense of humor, then asked them to rate their own performance. The results were chilling. The worst performers consistently overestimated their abilities, often by huge margins. Meanwhile, the top performers tended to underestimate theirs. This wasn't just about skill. It was about perception. The very people who lacked ability also lacked the self-awareness to realize it. This paradox became known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Those who know the least believe they know the most. Those who know the most believe they know too little. But here's where it gets deeper. This isn't just a psychological glitch. It's a mirror reflecting how modern society works. We live in a culture where certainty is rewarded, not wisdom. Where sounding confident matters more than being correct. Where the appearance of expertise is more valuable than expertise itself. Dunning-Kruger doesn't just explain annoying coworkers or arrogant influencers. It explains why systems fail, why bad ideas spread, and why brilliant people stay silent. Because the better you get at thinking, the more aware you become of how much you still don't know. That's not weakness. That's intellectual humility. But humility doesn't trend. It doesn't dominate boardrooms or go viral or win elections. What wins is boldness, real or fake. And so the world becomes louder, not smarter. This is the true danger of Dunning-Kruger. Not just that fools speak, but that we listen. If the smartest people are silent, it's not because they're weak. It's because they know better than to trust themselves too easily. This doubt, the constant second-guessing, isn't a flaw. It's a feature of deep thinking. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." At first glance, that sounds like false modesty. But it's not. It's epistemic humility, the understanding that knowledge is vast, infinite, and always incomplete. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you've missed. Meanwhile, the fool sees a tiny sliver of truth and assumes it's the whole picture. This is what philosopher Bertrand Russell meant when he wrote, "The trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt." But here's where it gets even darker. That self-doubt, that caution modern society doesn't reward it. It punishes it, because doubt is quiet. Certainty is loud. Doubt says, let me double check. Certainty says, I already know. And when these two voices compete, guess who wins the room? Not the careful thinker, but the confident fool. This creates a paradox. The more qualified you are to speak, the more hesitant you become. The less qualified you are, the more emboldened you feel. And in a world obsessed with speed branding and strong opinions, there's no time for nuance, no patience for complexity. So the loudest voices win by default. Not because they're right, but because they're fast, firm, and easy to digest. This isn't just a communication gap. It's a philosophical distortion. We've built a world that confuses noise with insight, performance with wisdom. And over time, even the wise begin to wonder, is it worth speaking if the world only listens to confidence? The answer isn't to silence the fool. It's to give space for the thoughtful, to relearn how to respect the slow, the careful, the humble. Because doubt isn't a weakness. It's the beginning of truth. The silence of the intelligent is not always a choice. Sometimes it's engineered. Modern society doesn't just tolerate loud ignorance. It incentivizes it. Think about it. In politics, who gets the headlines? The careful analyst who admits uncertainty, or the populist who shouts simple answers to complex problems? In the media, who goes viral? The thoughtful writer who wrestles with nuance, or the influencer who makes bold, sweeping claims in 10 seconds? In corporate life, who climbs faster? The one who questions assumptions, or the one who sells themselves with unshakable confidence? Everywhere you look, the system rewards certainty over curiosity, speed over depth, and image over substance. This isn't just an accident of capitalism or media algorithms. It's deeper. It's a sociological machine that selects for performance, not wisdom. It says, don't think too long. Don't question too much. Just sound confident. Just look the part. Over time, this creates what philosopher Ivan Illich called institutional stupidity, where the very systems designed to spread knowledge begin to punish the people who actually have it. Because real expertise is slow. It's uncertain. And uncertainty is bad for business, bad for ratings, bad for sales. So what happens? The intelligent retreat. They censor themselves. They hesitate, not because they're unsure, but because they know the cost of being misunderstood. And the fools, they thrive. Not in secret, but in full view with microphones and millions of followers. This isn't just about individuals. It's about what kind of knowledge survives in our culture. We are creating an ecosystem where the appearance of knowing is more important than actually knowing, where intellectual performance is mistaken for intellectual substance. Sociologist Neil Postman warned of this decades ago. He saw a future where public discourse would be dominated by entertainers pretending to be experts, and experts being too slow or too cautious to compete. That future is now, and it's not just frustrating, it's dangerous. Because when real insight is drowned out by noise, we don't just lose ideas. We lose direction. We build systems where decisions are made by the loudest, not the wisest. And then we wonder why everything breaks. If we want a smarter society, we can't just ask smart people to speak up. We have to make it safe to think aloud, to slow down, to say, I don't know, without being punished for it. Until then, the quietest minds will remain hidden, and the loudest mouths will keep leading us off cliffs. Silence can be noble, it can be powerful, but it can also become a trap. For some thinkers, silence is a form of protest, a way of saying, this world doesn't deserve the truth right now. Nietzsche once said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. But what happens when that why is drowned in noise, when wisdom feels not just unheard, but unwanted? Then silence becomes a shield, a protection from misunderstanding, from mockery, from the exhausting labor of having to justify every nuance to people who don't want to understand. But over time, that shield becomes a cage, and the very minds that could elevate society become locked behind apathy and quiet despair. Here's the tragedy. At first, the intelligent go silent because they feel outnumbered. Then, they stay silent because they feel out of place. Eventually, they convince themselves that silence is the only intelligent response. This is the danger, because silence can also be a kind of surrender. It whispers, let them speak, let them shout. It's not worth it anymore. And when too many smart people whisper that to themselves, the world becomes a vacuum, a space filled only by noise, where bad ideas go unchallenged, and people mistake volume for truth. This isn't a call for everyone to shout louder. It's a reminder that strategic silence must never become a permanent retreat, because silence shapes the world just as much as speech. A room full of intelligent people staying quiet while the foolish speak. That's not wisdom. That's abandonment. The philosopher Hannah Arendt warned of this during the rise of fascism. It wasn't just the evil that caused the collapse. It was the silence of the thinking class. The people who didn't want to get involved. The ones who stayed quiet even when they knew better. You don't have to scream, but if you never speak at all, don't be surprised when fools write the future in your name. Real wisdom doesn't have to be loud, but it has to be present. And sometimes just one voice of clarity is enough to remind the world that not everyone is asleep. The solution isn't for smart people to become louder. It's for them to become braver. Because in an age of performative certainty and algorithmic attention volume isn't the answer. Clarity is. We don't need more shouting. We need more people who are willing to speak without pretending to know everything. Who can hold space for complexity without collapsing into confusion? Who say, here's what I think, here's what I know, and here's where I'm still learning. That's not weakness. That's intellectual strength. But here's the catch. Our culture doesn't reward that kind of voice. It doesn't hand the mic to those who reflect it, rewards those who react. So if you want to be heard, you have to be strategic. You don't have to yell, but you do have to enter the arena. That means choosing when to speak and how. It means using metaphors that simplify without distorting, stories that resonate without preaching, and frameworks that invite others to think, not just agree. This is how philosophy must evolve, not as abstract as an ivory tower debate, but as applied to clarity in a chaotic world. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." You don't transform minds by overpowering them. You do it by meeting them where they are, then guiding them to where they didn't know they could go. So the real work begins not by rejecting the noise, but by speaking through it. That might mean using platforms you once looked down on, writing online, creating videos, sharing ideas in bite-sized pieces that open doors instead of trying to knock them down. Because the world doesn't just need deep thinkers. It needs visible ones. And if you stay invisible, by choice or by fear, the space you vacate will be filled by someone else. Probably someone louder, and definitely someone less equipped. You don't have to abandon nuance. You just have to translate it. Speak in a way that resonates. Not because you dumbed it down, but because you respected people enough to make it accessible. This isn't a compromise. It's a service. In the war against noise, the clearest voice wins. If you've made it this far, you already understand what most people don't, that the loudest voices in the room aren't always the ones we should be listening to. That real intelligence doesn't always sound like a TED Talk. It doesn't crave applause, and it certainly doesn't need to win every argument. But here's the thing. If smart people always wait for the perfect moment to speak, if they always bow out to avoid conflict, if they keep retreating into silence just to avoid noise, then the world will be shaped by those who are the most confident, not the most correct. And that is a dangerous blueprint for any society. Nietzsche warned us, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. We don't need more people who just fit in. We need more people willing to stand out, not through arrogance but through earned clarity. Because silence is not neutral. In a world full of misinformation, silence is permission. And every time a wise voice stays quiet, it leaves the stage wide open for another fool to fill the gap. So here's your challenge. Speak, even if your voice shakes, even if you're still figuring it out. Speak not because you're certain, but because you care. The future won't belong to those who shout the loudest. It will belong to those who dared to speak when it mattered. And sometimes one calm, steady sentence can do more than 1,000 screaming lies.